Welcome to the Dawgs Table. Hosted by Craig Fountain and
Ryan Angelo.
Get access to special guests. Anyone can join the Dawgs Table. Find the link to join the show in the comments when we go live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Periscope, and everywhere on the BIGPLAY network. Here's your hosts.
Welcome to the Dawgs Table. I'm one of your hosts, Craig Fountain, here with Ryan Angelo. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm good, buddy. How are you? Happy Tuesday.
I'm doing outstanding. I am remote again, and I will have you guys know the intro should be updated by next week's show to include Ryan, right? So, yeah, I know. It's been kind of a process getting everything switched over. So, yeah. But we are the Dawgs Table. We're a Cleveland Browns Roundtable discussion show brought to you by BIGPLAY, Labatt Blue Light, and Remax Edge Realty, the JC Group. We are here to talk Cleveland Browns with you. There's the Labatt Blue, and I'm actually going to have to dip out of the screen here in a second and get my own because I forgot to set it tableside. I'm out of my routine coming live from the campgrounds. Although the internet's probably better out here than at home. So. But we're a Cleveland Browns Roundtable discussion show. Anybody can join the show if you want. We can display your comments just like this. Red Leg, thanks for joining the show. Jose, Millennial Browns fan, thanks for joining the show. Skylar, how are you doing tonight? We're doing great. We're going to put the links in the comment. Link it to join the show in the comments a little bit later. In the meantime, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can comment and we can interact with you. Ask us questions. We'll answer them, bring up topics, point things out, whatever you want to do, correct us. We are oftentimes wrong or need an ask the audience type situation. So
Craig's usually wrong more than me, let's be honest, but it's okay.
What's that, Ryan?
I said you're usually wrong more than me, but just putting that out there for everybody at home.
Hey, D, how are you doing? Thanks for joining the show from Kentucky. Appreciate you joining the show. All right. So yesterday we went live briefly. It was very informal. Following the Deshaun Watson news, for those of you that couldn't tune in, we discussed just kind of our snap reactions to the news that Deshaun Watson was suspended for 6 games. I think we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that tonight. And we'll kind of see where that takes us throughout the show. Before we get into that, does anybody have any questions for us on the show? Not a whole lot going in the news. Training camp's going pretty smooth. We had wide receiver Isaiah Weston. He got waived with an injury designation. We signed a USFL guy, right? Brian, Derek. Oh, I forget his last name.
I can't remember his last name.
Yeah, that's all right. Don't hold your breath. We'll learn it if it's important, I guess. But I wasn't prepared with that name right here. Other than that, not a whole lot's been going on. The Browns issued a statement from D and Jimmy, which was interesting. Stefanski was asked about it. A lot of these guys have been available for press conferences. They've all kind of been asked about it. But let's kind of dive in. Ryan, any thoughts on the suspension since yesterday? Has anything changed for you? as far as how you're feeling about the suspension and the report that came out and everything?
No, I mean, I think the report that came out, obviously, you know, Sue Robinson kind of played the fence. I think, she was kind of said this yesterday. I think she poked a few holes in the NFL's disciplinary process and their attempt to try to get the punishment increased through the media. And then at the same time, she, scolded Deshaun for the things that he did, indicated that he did, in fact, break the conduct policy as per written by the NFL. And so she subsequently suspended him for 6 games. So, I mean, it's right in line from what I've been saying from the get-go, 4 to 6 games, right? I just couldn't see anything crazier than that with an independent arbitrator just because the precedent's not there. So that's just kind of what I stuck with. And, she made me look semi-smart, I guess. But, yeah, I mean, nothing's really changed for me. I think that we're still waiting to find out if the NFL is going to appeal. And, like Jose asked here, I don't know. I'm back and forth on this. I really don't think they're going to in the end. I think it's going to I think it's going to do more damage than good for the whole optics of everything, for the NFL, for Watson, for the lack of discipline on the owners and stuff like that. I think it's too much. I think they want to just get done with it and move on at this point. But there's part of me that feels like the NFL might throw a wrinkle in there somewhere just because it is the NFL. But right now we're just waiting.
Yeah, absolutely. We are waiting, and at least we know what we're waiting for, right? So this is going to be something where there's a finite amount of time before something is known. The appeals process or the window to appeal is 3 days. All right. So it's not quite open ending like, for weeks. When are we going to know? When are we going to know? When are we going to know? It's not going to be quite like that, which is nice. Do you think it will just be them wanting a fine rather than adding more games if they do? So there are reports, and, as far as the merit of those reports, it's kind of hard to tell, but reports are that they met and the NFL offered him a settlement prior to this decision being met to where it was like, 12 games and a $10 million fine. Is that right, Ryan?
Yeah, I believe so.
So that's the report that went out, so if they want to come down harder on Watson than Sue Robinson did and risk Watson's camp taking legal action along with the NFLPA versus the NFL, they may do a fine. Maybe they feel that if they added games, it would increase the likelihood of legal action against them, but maybe they feel they can get away with a fine and not cause as much of an issue. But clearly the NFL didn't get what they want out of this. And I don't think Sue Robinson really handed out quite the punishment that she wanted to either. It's really hard to tell. And we're actually going to pull up, I have for us the PDF of the decisions so that we can comb through it together. The fact that they just came down hard on the Dolphins owner franchise makes me think an appeal is coming. I mean, if they're going to do it, I mean, listen, the NFL hasn't always made sense, right? So it's easy to say, well, logic says they won't do this, and there's a very clear reason as to why they won't. In this instance, I think Ryan, you would agree. Most of us would agree. The NFL is really, really getting into opening a can of worms if they appeal this. Logic says let it go. Neither side is happy. That's a good sign of a compromise. And we can get past this and move along and it not be a daily fixture of the news cycle. But the NFL doesn't always make sense. They almost never have. And that was a point that Sue Robinson made in her report. Dee says, I think it would be very dumb of the NFL to appeal at this point because they're not the smartest. Listen, they mishandled the investigation. They mishandled the meetings with Watson, I believe. All right. They did not put enough effort, in my opinion. If I'm putting myself in the NFL shoes, I'm not saying from my perspective, but if I was if I was with the NFL, I'd be upset at the case that they made for themselves against Deshaun Watson because it clearly wasn't as strong as it could have been.
Right.
I feel like they've kind of half-assed this entire thing. Ryan?
I agree. And I honestly look at the fact that the Dolphins situation was released today as not a coincidence. I think that was a planned release. And I think that actually says more to the NFL trying to move on at this point. That's the way I see it. I think that they are going to do whatever they can do to get past this. Like you said, it just opens up too many cans of worms for them to, muddy the waters any further than they have been. And I just think that them releasing the discipline on the Dolphins was their first step in trying to move on from the process of Watson's situation. I think they'll probably take the entire 3 days, and sometime on Thursday afternoon, they'll release something saying that they're not going to appeal and probably say they wish that it would have been a higher suspension, but they're going to respect the process given that this is the, jointly agreed upon process and the first, disciplinary action that's come from that.
All right. So in front of us now, we have the decision in the matter of Deshaun Watson. If you guys in the comments, let me know if this is large enough, if you can see it. I might be able to make it a little bit bigger. Let's see here. Try to expand it a little bit. All right. You can see my mouse there. All right. So this is actually not that long of a document, and there's a lot of things. To me, there's sections of this where a lot is said in very few words, and then a good portion of this, almost nothing is said with a lot of words, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So we're going to kind of go through this, and really where they start is identifying the collective bargaining agreement, the NFLPA, the NFL, the personal conduct policy, with a little bit of an explanation. And, it even highlights the prohibited conduct. All right. Actual or threatened physical violence against another person, assault and or battery, including sexual assault, violent or threatening behavior towards another employee, so on and so forth. Right. So they're laying out some things up front. All right. They're explaining the process here. Starting in 2020, the initial determination of whether a player in the NFL has violated the policy, and if so, what discipline should be handed out, should be made by the disciplinary officer, in this case, Sue Robinson, right? And then we get on to past the introduction. Can you see me? My screen's freezing up. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
I can see you. You're not frozen on my end.
All right,
yeah.
I'm good. All right. So, Ryan, when you first read this, all right, it seems like she's really taking a shot at the NFL. Did you feel that way? For sure?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, like I said, she's poking holes. She's poking holes in the process, and I think she's using those holes to justify the reasoning of why she came to the conclusion that she did. You have an independent person to be independent. That person is not there to rule in favor of one party or the other, or be pressured by one party or the other. So the fact that she, points out things like the investigation was conducted by 2 former prosecutors with decades of experience investigating sexual assault cases and such, that's telling the public a lot of detail about what the public actually didn't know going into this process, right? So we didn't know how the investigation took place. We didn't know who's involved in that. All we know is that the big bag at NFL is, investigating this guy. Well, who does that? Who handles it? So, I think she put a lot of good information in there for sure.
All right. And then, there's some information here about, just stuff that's on the record. The NFL only investigated the claims of 24 therapists. They've got some time frames, things like that in here. But the NFL's investigation, this is where she starts talking about the pattern of conduct. All right. He's got access to team-provided and approved massage therapists. Mr. Watson sought out private massages and, according to the NFL, used his status as an NFL player as a pretext in engaging with these women. His requests were generally urgent. He wanted same-day stuff. He wanted to make sure that it was private, but didn't care if it was in a professional setting. And he admitted that he didn't care if they were actual massage therapists or even licensed. So that is I guess what you could say, a paraphrase. I don't think I'm twisting anything here, right, Ryan?
No, not at all.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. Only 3. All right. So of the 4 massage therapists who are subject of the report, only 3 were licensed and operating their own businesses. The 4th was working towards having a license. He would follow his Instagram contact with texts or calls before each session to make sure that the therapists were comfortable massaging certain areas of his body. All right, so he sought them out under the pretext of being an NFL player, said, hey, I need a massage. It's urgent. I'm not really worried about the setting if you're licensed, but I need to make sure that you're comfortable with working on certain parts of my body. Okay. Mm-hmm. And he particularly noted his lower back, glutes, abs, and groin area as his focus points. He requested that the therapist use a towel to cover his private parts rather than the more typically used sheet. Mr. Watson often provided his own towels, which have been described as medium or small or Gatorade towels, referencing, I think, the ones you would see on the football field, the players using. Right. So once in the massage sessions, the therapist all alleged that he engaged in what the NFL characterized as sexualized behavior. It included his insistence that the therapist work on his focus points with just a towel as cover. When he turned over on his back, other things were alleged, and one of the therapists alleged that Mr. Watson not only contacted her arm multiple times, but that other things happened there. You guys can read it on the screen. There's no allegation that Mr. Watson exerted any force against any of the therapists. Now, this has been a sticking point with a lot of folks, right? So there was no, at least in this up to this point, there's no mention of any violence, threat of violence, anything like that. Now, it is important to distinguish between threat or threats of violence and coercion, but that's something that's a little more convoluted. I don't think that neither myself nor Ryan or any of you guys watching on Twitter are all that qualified to really separate the coercion part of it, but it's muddy at best. Now, the NFL alleges that Deshaun Watson violated 3 provisions. It's bothering me that there's typos in this, and I saw somebody else point this out on Twitter. It's bothering me there's typos. 3 provisions of the policy by engaging in sexual assault, conduct that poses a genuine danger to the safety and well-being of another person, and conduct that undermines or puts at risk the integrity of the NFL. So she'll address each allegation. So right now she's simply stating that this is what the NFL is alleging. Ryan, do you want to take this first one? Kind of going on screen here?
Sure. So she says sexual assault is not defined in the CBA, the policy or the report. She says that on behalf of the NFL, one of these investigators defined the term at the evidentiary hearing as unwanted sexual contact with another person. The NFL argued that Watson committed sexual assault by allegedly touching his penis to the woman without their consent. And it's their, obviously their prerogative to impose the policy on the players. They are given a burden of proof in that instance. When they do enforce the policy, they have a burden of proof to prove that his actions were more likely true than not. So what that means is it's more likely true than not that he actually committed that act, right? So that number one, he intended to cause contact with his penis. Number two, he did that with a sexual purpose. And number three, he knew that it was an unwanted contact between him and the massage therapist. The NFL presented a record to support the allegations of sexual assaults, which includes many undisputed facts. There's no dispute that Watson used Instagram to contact the therapist, and that he was clearly identified himself as an NFL player through Instagram. There's no dispute that he reached out for private massage sessions with women whose professional qualifications were unknown to him, nor were their professional qualifications explored by him. He always forecasted his desire to, have certain areas of his body massaged, including the lower back, glutes, abs, and groin. And then in all four cases, if you can go ahead and put that up for me. There you go. They were willing to go forward with the massages. However, none of the therapists were willing to offer him, a massage after the initial massage. There's no dispute that he preferred a towel to the traditionally used sheet that's usually draped over a person. If you get a massage, they go, you go into the parlor, they put a full sheet on you. He didn't want that. He wanted his own towels, which they didn't dispute in that instance. In doing so, she said there should be no dispute in a medium or small size towel will more likely slip off of the body, leaving him exposed. So she's saying that essentially it's more likely than not that towel is not going to stay in place versus a sheet, right? She also points out that much of the alleged conduct is not in and itself challenged as wrongful. The use of Instagram is not wrong, correct? You can reach out to people. It's commonplace to use social media in today's society to make business connections and to negotiate things. So she, especially for professional athletes, she makes that a point to point that out and say that it's not unusual there. It is not unusual for therapists to inadvertently contact a male client's penis while treating these legitimate focus areas, nor for a male client during a massage to become aroused. So, I mean, she's not disputing that that's not something that's never happened in the history of massages, essentially. She said that he did not testify that he had an erection and inadvertently touched the therapist here. Instead, he has denied all those allegations, to the T. He's saying that he never developed an erection, essentially. She says, the fact that he's not willing to admit that and he's denying it plays a part in this process. The totality of the evidence, including the undisputed facts related to his use of towels, his focal points, that he wanted massaged, and then the not uncommon experience of massage therapists to have contact with an aroused penis during that, during a massage, essentially. It supports the conclusion that it is more probable than not that he did have erections and that his erect penis in that case happened to have some type of contact with the therapist.
All right. Barry, welcome to the show. Not to interrupt your flow there, Ryan. Oops. Let me
Hi, Barry.
Scroll back up here. All right. So then she gets into whether or not, the contact was intentional. And she's saying here the matter of intent generally must be inferred from circumstantial evidence in the absence of an admission. And I'm assuming she's talking about like actual evidence here. And in this case, Watson reached out to women whose professional qualifications were unknown and unimportant. All right. This is something that she's brought up more than once at this point. I think she's insinuating, and you can correct me if I'm off base here, Ryan, that this leads to his intent. Was his intent to really get a massage, or for something else? If you would think as a professional athlete that could afford whatever massage you wanted, you could, in theory, even on short notice, get a professional massage, and you should be concerned with their qualifications.
Correct.
She says then that he engaged in a pattern of conduct multiple times and finds these sufficient circumstantial evidence to support the NFL's contention that not only the contact occurred, but that Mr. Watson was aware that contact probably would occur, and that Mr. Watson had a sexual purpose, not just a therapeutic purpose. And that's what she was foreshadowing with the prior statement that we just went over in making these arrangements with these particular therapists. Finally, she finds that the NFL has produced sufficient circumstantial evidence to prove the last prong of the test, that Mr. Watson knew that such sexualized contact was unwanted. Of course, there's no indication on the record that even experienced therapists want such contact, and Mr. Watson certainly did not seek out the most experienced therapist. Moreover, there's credible evidence that one of these therapists expressed her discomfort of the unwanted contact of Mr. Watson during the sessions, and another of the therapists ended the session early. So we're looking at 4, right? One
Correct.
of the 4 is not licensed. One of them ended the session early. The other one made it known that it was unwanted. All right.
Correct.
Given that none of these therapists accepted Watson's invitations to engage in further therapy sessions, I find the evidence sufficient to demonstrate that Mr. Watson knew or should have known that any contact between himself and these therapists was unwanted. I'm only avoiding that word, Ryan, not because I'm a child or because there's some sort of censorship. Actually, maybe you should too, because there are people that will probably like take a little clip of this and like turn it into like a rap remix to try to embarrass me. So
Okay.
I'm just not gonna give them any footage of that.
Pedro.
All right, what's that, BJ?
Pedro.
Pedro.
Who is that from?
Napoleon Dynamite,
Varsity Blues.
Varsity Blues.
Remember when the teacher's standing in there talking about the male erection, and she has him name all the different names for it. Purple-headed mushroom slinger, purple,
Yeah.
and Pedro. So from now on, just refer to it as Pedro.
Gotcha.
I therefore find the NFL has carried its burden to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Watson engaged in sexual assault as defined by the NFL against the 4 therapists identified in the report. Mr. Watson violated the policy in this regard. So in some ways, she's saying, the NFL, their investigation and their submission showed that, it did its job, right? Like it showed what they wanted it to show, regardless of how sloppy the investigation was, which I think it was, regardless of whether or not they investigated all the claims that they could have. We'll never know all that stuff. But
Correct.
what they submitted, they did their part. Now, that was for, scroll back up here, sorry, guys, conduct that qualifies as a sexual assault. All right, so that's 1. 2 is conduct that poses a genuine danger to the safety and well-being of another person. Once again, there's no definition provided in the policy or the CBA for prohibited conduct for genuine danger to the safety and well-being of another person. Neither, the way this is worded made that a tough sentence. Neither has the NFL provided a definition in connection with this matter. The evidence upon which the NFL relies for proof of this offense, however, is based squarely on the emotional responses of the 4 therapists to Mr. Watson's conduct. So it's noted here that the responses were emotional, right?
Correct.
Some would lend that, I believe, to like, she noted emotional for a reason, right?
Right.
They could have been stronger than normal. They could have been exaggerated. They could have been muted, depending on what type of emotion. We don't know. For instance, the NFL asserts that the therapists were fearful of Mr. Watson's ability to use his status as an NFL player to damage their professional careers. And this is an allegation that's come up or been speculated on time and time again. Did Watson say or insinuate without saying, hey, I have power. I'm a powerful person. If you don't do what I'm asking you to do, then it could be dangerous for you. And if you tell on me, it could be dangerous for me. So why don't we just not be a danger to each other? I think that's where the allegations of coercion come in. And for those of you listening, not watching, that can't see the report, if you're listening on the podcast after that, that particular part's not in the report. I'm trying to paraphrase or give a little bit of insight here.
And that's speculation as well. It's never been actually alleged that he said anything like that.
Correct. Absolutely. So where am I at now? Further evidence identified by the NFL in support of this offense includes testimony from the 4 therapists. One of the therapists told investigators that she sought counseling after her session with Mr. Watson and is struggling to work. So that implies that she required therapy afterwards, that she was having trouble dealing with whatever the situation was, and she wasn't even working or was struggling to work because of it. Another of the therapists reported that she was frustrated, upset, and embarrassed after the session. A third therapist testified that she changed her business practices and suffered from depression and sleeplessness as a result of the incident. The 4th therapist remained uncertain whether she would continue to pursue a career in massage therapy. When comparing the above evidence against the other examples of violent conduct prohibited by the policy, it is apparent that the NFL has taken the occasion to broadly define the concepts of genuine danger, safety, and well-being in its charge against Mr. Watson. She's starting to poke holes in the NFL.
Right.
As I stated earlier, it is the NFL's policy, and it can set the rules. It's a business. Okay, so important to note, the quote is, as I stated earlier, it's the NFL's policy, and it can set the rules, end quote. What I'm saying is they're a business. It's any business can set their own rules, their own policies, and they can define their rules how they want to, and they can, as long as it's within the bounds of the law, I guess you could say, they can discipline for somebody breaking those rules or breaking those policies. Okay, back to the report. I accept the fact that a work environment with sexualized conduct is not a safe environment, and I accept as credible the testimony of these therapists that they felt unsafe and suffered emotional distress as a result of their massage sessions with Mr. Watson. So at this point, she's saying the witnesses are credible, their testimony is credible. All right, so let's just get that out of the way. They're credible, their testimony is credible, and I believe them, is what she's saying. Ryan, would you take it that way? It's okay if you don't. It's important that we're not slanting this one way or the other. So that tells me she feels that they're A,
right,
and again, B, she believes them.
I think it's important to remember that all of this process, all the facts, it's more likely than not, right? That's what they're trying to determine, the more likely than not. And I think that her stating that she sees that it's as credible testimony from these therapists that felt unsafe and suffered emotional distress as a result of her massage therapists. So I think they're stating that she's stating if it's more likely than not that he did this action or this action inadvertently happened or, intentionally happened, whichever, it's more likely than not that these women are telling the truth, that they had, issues with this situation after the fact. So I see what you're saying.
Now, she does point out that the NFL's interpretation of this is broad. She says, based on the NFL's broad interpretation of this prohibited conduct as reflected in the evidence it chose to present, I find that the NFL has carried its burden to prove by a preponderance of evidence that Mr. Watson's conduct posed a genuine danger to the safety and well-being of another person. Thus far, she's saying the first prong, all right, which was sexual assault, correct?
Yep. Yes. As defined by the NFL, yes.
As defined by the NFL. And the second one, that she accepts those. They presented, she accepts those. So we have 2 out of the 3 at this point.
Correct.
All right. Barry, any thoughts so far? No? Okay. All right. He's here for moral support. All right. Conduct that undermines or puts at risk the integrity of the NFL. The NFL asserts that Mr. Watson's conduct has undermined the public's confidence in the integrity and reputation of the NFL and its players. According to the NFL, the matters that can affect such integrity and public confidence in this game of professional football evolve and change over time, depending on developments within and external to the league, and the parties to the CBAs have agreed not to operate with a static or frozen definition of conduct detrimental. The NFL has invoked this detriment to the league language for such conduct as Tom Brady's deflation of the game balls used in the AFC Championship game back in 2015. There was the Bountygate scandal, the 2012 New Orleans Saints that Sue references, the pay-for-performance scheme, she calls it. Although the above examples were focused on the game of football itself, it is clearly within the purview of the NFL to expand the scope of its supervision to a player's private life. If his status as a player while engaging in prohibited conduct, if it invokes his status. Ryan, I'm going to let you take this next page here.
Okay. So she says that in this regard, the NFL has demonstrated that Mr. Watson identified himself as a player for the NFL to initiate conduct with the therapist. And he used his ties to the Texans to reinforce his requests for massages focused on his lower back, glutes, abs, and groin area. Having established himself in this context, the NFL has further demonstrated that Mr. Watson engaged in sexualized conduct during the massage sessions, and she finds the evidence sufficient to demonstrate that Mr. Watson's conduct undermined the integrity of the NFL in the eyes of the therapist. Mr. Watson's conduct also has been scrutinized on a national level, she says, and that alleged conduct has been a matter of public record and discourse over an extended period of time. Regardless of her findings, it's apparent that Mr. Watson acted with a reckless disregard for the consequences of his actions by exposing himself and the NFL to such public scrutiny and speculation. Watson's predatory conduct casts a negative light on the league and its players. She has that quotation, which I believe that's probably from the policy itself. Sufficient proof that he violated the provision of the policy.
So we have the all three needs for this has been met by the NFL with
Correct.
their case, right? They, by their definition, sexual assault, safety and well-being, integrity of the NFL. Again, by the NFL standards, by their policies.
Correct.
Okay. So this is where she gets into the determination. And we're already on page 11 out of 16, right? So, and we've actually been kind of going almost word by word this entire document. So we're almost there. But this is where the determination begins. Having found that the NFL carried its burden to prove by a preponderance of evidence that Mr. Watson violated the policy in various ways, it is my responsibility to review any recommended discipline for consistency of treatment, uniformity of standards for parties similarly situated, and patent unfairness or selectivity. This task includes examining the existing disciplinary standards and prior disciplinary outcomes, as well as considering any mitigating or aggravating factors, all with the goal of reaching a fair and consistent disciplinary determination. What a run-on sentence. Anyways,
Right.
Basically she's saying she has to be impartial. But
Correct.
she's also going to take into consideration existing disciplinary standards and prior disciplinary outcomes. And this is actually important, as we'll find reading through. As the disciplinary officer, I've been given broad authority to determine the appropriate level of discipline, subject to appeal by any party to the commissioner. So the commissioner or a party he appoints can appeal this decision after this determination within a period of 3 days. And that's where we find ourselves now. We're in that period of 3 days. We don't know what's going on.
Correct.
The NFL has recommended that Mr. Watson be suspended for at least the entire 2022 NFL regular and postseason and not be permitted to return unless he satisfies any conditions imposed for reinstatement. So, Browns fans, if you're old enough, you're familiar with the Josh Gordon bridge. That is where you satisfy suspension. That's not the end of it. You have to apply for reinstatement. So that's what they were calling for, a full year, regular season, postseason, and then apply for reinstatement. All right. And that's for the entire 2022 season. According to the NFL, if this recommended sentence is unprecedented, as characterized by Mr. Watson and the NFLPA, that is because his conduct is unprecedented. So the NFL is saying, hey, if you want to say this is unprecedented and complain about that, take into consideration the seriousness of these allegations. The NFL is alleging that these allegations, they're alleging the allegations. They're saying this is unprecedented conduct. There is no precedent for dealing with this. This isn't a failed drug test. This isn't gambling. This isn't whatever. That's what the NFL is saying here. And she's acknowledging that, that she understands that that's the NFL's viewpoint. Is that accurate, Ryan?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
I agree.
All right. The NFL's reasoning is reflected in the following testimony of one of its investigators. Even with just the 4 women, I think we haven't had someone who, over the course of a year plus time, committed sexual assault against 4 different people. And he uses again, invokes the league in some ways of doing so. That in and of itself is unprecedented.
That's a terrible sentence, by the way.
It was a terrible sentence. They had to correct the sentence. Like, there's grammatical errors and spelling errors that they corrected, which made it really hard to read. Yeah, so then it goes on to say the NFLPA responds first by relating the history of policy and discipline imposed under the policy. And prior to the NFL's disciplinary action against Ray Rice in 2014, there were no standards differentiating violent conduct from other prohibited conduct. So she's acknowledging the fact that Ray Rice's situation where he punched his then fiance in the elevator, he knocked her out, right? I believe he knocked her out and then drug her out of the elevator.
Correct. Yes. Yes. It was a full-on punch to unconsciousness.
Right. And at that point, the NFL, there was precedent starting to be set between whether or not actions that were breaking the conduct policy were violent or non-violent. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So, a 2-game suspension was the prevailing ceiling established by the precedent. All right, so Ray Rice got 2 days for knocking out his then fiance and dragging her out of the elevator. All right, so when Commissioner Goodell followed such precedent despite the violence of Rice's conduct, a public outcry ensued. The NFL responded by revising its policy to include a presumptive 6-game suspension without pay for certain first-time violent offenders, including for policy violations involving criminal assault or battery that are felonies, domestic violence, dating violence, child abuse, and other forms of family violence, or sexual assault involving physical force or committed against someone incapable of giving consent. So she's saying the Ray Rice incident happened. They set the precedent by acknowledging the fact that they were going to treat a violent situation differently. They gave him 2 games. There was a public outcry, so then they revised their policy and said, listen, it's a minimum of, we're going to start at 6 games, and depending on what the offense is or what happened, we'll go from there. But it's a presumptive 6-game suspension. And then obviously lists a number of different types of violence.
Correct.
By revising its policy, the NFL gave fair notice to its players and to the public of the probable consequences of certain violent conduct. So players that engage in violent conduct are aware of the consequences that are likely to be set forth before them. So are the teams.
Correct.
Okay? All right. A demonstrative exhibit used during the hearing indicates that since the revisions to the policy starting in 2015 until today, by far the most commonly imposed discipline for domestic or gendered violence and sexual acts is a 6-game suspension. Only 2 players have been suspended for 8 games, one for multiple incidents of domestic violence and the second for assault of multiple victims. A single player has been suspended for 10 games for multiple incidents of domestic violence for which the player pled guilty to battery. Now, a couple things to note here. She's saying 2 players have been suspended for 8 games, which is more than the presumptive 6. Multiple incidents of domestic violence, and the second for assault of multiple victims. A single player has been suspended for 10 games for multiple incidents of domestic violence for which the player pled guilty to battery. She's acknowledging that not only was there criminal charges, there was a resolution and he pled guilty, right? He was guilty.
Correct.
By law.
Yes.
In court.
Yeah. What she's referencing here is the criminal side of things, right? So her charge is to make sure that the things that the NFL are alleging that he did are more likely to have happened than to not. She is not here as a criminal proceeding where circumstantial evidence is not used in criminal proceedings. So that's why you saw the 2 grand juries and the NFL or the 2 grand juries essentially say we cannot go forward with charges because what we have is purely circumstantial. They can't use that in criminal proceedings. And I think that's what she's saying is those individuals that received stiffer punishments were charged with criminal offenses.
Correct. And then it goes on to say it's undisputed that Mr. Watson's conduct does not fall into the category of violent conduct, which would require the minimum 6-game suspension. So whether or not there was coercion, she's acknowledging the fact that these were not violent encounters based on the information provided to her that is known to the NFL, to her, to really anyone. I'm sure if it was, it would have been brought to her. It likewise is undisputed that prior cases involving nonviolent sexual assault have resulted in discipline far less severe than what the NFL proposes here, with the most severe penalty being a 3-game suspension for a player who had been previously warned about his conduct. So she's saying the precedent that's been set is 3 games for nonviolent sexual assault, and that player had been warned about their conduct prior to receiving this discipline. Admittedly, I'm not sure which player she's referencing. At least off the top of my head,
I can't off the top of my head either.
I'm actually not really recalling who was the single player that was suspended for 10 games for multiple incidents of domestic violence. I'm not recalling that one either.
Wasn't how long was Kareem Hunt?
Kareem Hunt wasn't Kareem Hunt just a couple games?
No.
Or was his 6? Zeke was 6. Kareem might have been 6. But again, these are violent offenses, right?
Correct.
There's an element of violence in these ones we're talking about. So while it may be entirely appropriate to more severely disciplining players for nonviolent sexual conduct.
It was Greg Hardy, not to interrupt you.
That
Greg
makes
Hardy.
sense. Yeah, Greg Hardy. That's right. I do not believe it's appropriate to do so without notice of the extraordinary change in this position for the NFL and its players. Similarly, the concepts of unfairness and selectivity demand notice in this case. So here we go back to notice and fair notice. You can't just drop the hammer, I think is what she's saying, when it's that much different than before. So the precedent's been set. You can't just make something up as you go and not use that as some sort of precedent. So she's explaining herself here. So while in her mind, she may be saying 6 games is fair, she may also be saying, hey, the NFL's right, or not only would I agree with the NFL, I would go beyond if it were up to me, but it's not. As somebody who's impartial and with fair notice and with taking the past incidents that we have for precedent, I can't just throw the book at them. We can go up, but we can't go nuts here. Right, Ryan?
Yeah. I mean, I think she's essentially saying that, you're an employer and you've punished people under a policy that they've been given fair notice of. And now a new incident has happened and you're trying to alter that policy to fit the need of this current situation, which she's saying you haven't given that person notice that if something, or all your employees notice that if something of this nature is to happen, this is where your punishment is going to start. So.
Okay, so Hunt was 8 games.
Yeah, Hunt was 8 games.
Winston was the 3 games.
Yeah. Hardy was 10, but got reduced to 4. Then there was Pac-Man Jones, and he was at 16, but that was after
35 warnings.
Yeah, he was the one.
Which she didn't even reference that one.
All of them are all violent offenses too.
They are
right.
That's the good thing there. It's a violent offense.
Exactly.
So I'm not, and I'm not condoning any of this because this is I do appreciate that she literally blasted Deshaun Watson. She basically said, "Hey, you're a scumbag." Basically,
I don't know if she necessarily said he's a scumbag. I think she said whether you had intent or not, what you were doing could be seen as as establishing a pattern of offenses where.
Well, what? And here's and like I'm still all up and down about this, right? I'm all over, because then I can sit there and I can be like, what's the difference between Deshaun Watson hitting somebody up on the internet and be like, hey, you want to come over and give me a massage? I'll pay you. And say some single dude hitting up some chick off of sliding their DMs on Facebook and saying, hey, you want Netflix and chill? Like,
right. There's not a difference there. And she referenced that early in the thing and said that it's commonplace in today's society for individuals to seek out services through social media. So the fact that he did that alone doesn't prove intent to do anything criminal or anything to, break the policy. But it's the other things where she's saying it's more likely or not that the fact that you would rather use a 2x2 towel versus a 10x10 sheet, shows me that there's, in your mind, that there's a chance that that's going to fall off of your body, kind of thing. And so, I mean, she's trying to say that there's no way that she could establish intent in this whole situation. Like, she's saying that it's more likely than not that these things happened and that he may have known that these things could happen, but she can't prove that he intentionally went into these situations hoping that someone was going to do this or hoping that he was going to get those things. It's more likely than not that he probably was. And I think we've all agreed that he probably had some type of fetish that he was trying to play out, right? But she's saying that she doesn't have enough evidence to say that he intended to do so. And if they did, frankly, he probably would have been charged criminally.
I mean, is it really a fetish though? Who really does not want a massage from a hot girl that ends
right? But I understandable.
Is that a fetish?
Understandable.
So she goes on and says, kind of what Ryan says, where the NFL is a private organization and can operate as it deems fit. That is something that she brings up, but then she kind of does the ping pong thing where she comes back the other way and says, but in fairness, which is kind of what we went over, the fairness prong of the standard of review, or to justify the imposition of the unprecedented sanction requested by the NFL, no bueno. Okay. So she then says, with respect to what the appropriate discipline should be, I note that there are aggravating factors applicable to Mr. Watson. All right. So we look at the precedent set, 3 games. She notes that it's nonviolent. These things likely happened. Everything's circumstantial. Can't prove intent. Can't prove anything. But that they likely happened, and the allegations came from credible people. The aggravating factor in her mind is where she says aggravating factors applicable to Mr. Watson. That is his lack of expressed remorse and his tardy notice to the NFL of the first filed lawsuit. Now, the first one is where he said, I'm innocent. I got nothing to be sorry about, whatever, which is fine. If he's innocent, then that's something an innocent person would say. The problem with that is if you're not innocent, that's also something somebody that's not innocent would say. All right. So the other thing that she brings up is this tardy notice to the NFL of the first filed lawsuit. And I think I'm assuming that references them finding out by themselves, right? Like he didn't say, hey, by the way, there's a lawsuit. Is that what that means? I don't know.
I think that's what she means. I'm not 100. That one kind of threw me for a loop too. I'm not 100% sure on what she meant by that, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So,
but I think you're on the right lines there. That essentially it came out in the media before he notified the NFL that something was there.
So we'll take that with a grain of salt.
Correct.
And you guys should too, especially if you're listening and can't read for yourself on the screen. All right. Okay. So mitigating factors. So the aggravated factors are lack of express remorse and tardy notice to the NFL. The mitigating factors is that he's a first-time offender and had an excellent reputation in his community prior to these events. So she's saying, listen, by all appearances, that he's not just like a stand-up guy. Like this guy had major impacts on the community. He was involved in good things. He appears to be a good person. He does things that good people do. And it's a first-time offense. It's not like he's been warned about it, at least that anybody knows of. And it doesn't appear that, he's ever been reprimanded in the past for anything like this. Although Mr. Watson did not play during the 2021 season, the commissioner declined to put him on administrative leave under which any games missed would be credited against any suspension later imposed. Now, Watson, I think, shot himself in the foot on this one. I don't think he anticipated these allegations coming out if he knew that he was doing something wrong. If he's innocent, then it would be dumb luck. If not, I don't know how else to put it. Because if you're not doing anything wrong, you wouldn't anticipate anything. But the reason he didn't play in 2021 wasn't because of these allegations. It wasn't some de facto suspension, right? So everybody that was like, oh, the suspension should go retro, I disagree with that. I really disagree with that because the reason he didn't play is because he didn't want to play.
Yeah, he didn't want to be a part of the Texans organization anymore.
Yeah, they traded away DeAndre Hopkins. There was roster things going on, things like that. He requested a trade prior to these allegations coming out. Didn't he show up to camp after that? I think he showed up to the camp and Texans said, nope, don't worry about it. Go home. But I don't think it was tied just to the allegations. Right, but regardless.
Right, yeah, no, he was ready to go.
Regardless, none of that's being credited towards a suspension. Nothing's going retroactive. The NFL, all right, conclusion. This is where she lays into the NFL right here. The NFL may be a quote-unquote forward-facing organization, but it is not necessarily a forward-looking one. Just as the NFL responded to violent conduct after a public outcry, so it seems the NFL is responding to yet another public outcry about Mr. Watson's conduct. She's saying, listen, you thought Ray Rice deserved 2 games for knocking out his then fiance in the elevator, dragging her around. It was video evidence, blah, 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 blah. You knew all the facts. It was on video, and you gave him only 2 games. That, in your mind, that offense was it was 2 games worth. And you only changed your stance to acknowledge whether or not something is violent or non-violent. Separate the two because the public said you should, because you got criticized.
Correct.
And then she's saying, you're doing that again. You're doing that again here. You're reacting. So
basically, she's saying you're all about saving face.
Yes.
Yep.
That's it.
100%.
Which, right, wrong, and different, whether you believe Watson did anything or not, like, no doubt this was a mess PR-wise for the NFL. And we all know that the NFL cares more about its image than what actually happened. But she's calling him out on it. At least in the former situation, she says, the policy was changed and applied proactively. Here, the NFL is attempting to impose a more dramatic shift in its culture without the benefit of fair notice to and consistency of consequence for those in the NFL subject to the policy. So here we're back to the fair notice. Looking at the record when compared to the relevant precedent and looking forward to how this disciplinary determination might be used in the future, I find the most appropriate landing place to be as follows. And this is where she doles out the discipline. Mr. Watson is hereby suspended for 6 regular season games without pay. Although this is the most significant punishment ever imposed on an NFL player for allegations of nonviolent sexual conduct, Mr. Watson's pattern of conduct is more egregious than any before reviewed by the NFL. All right, so 6 games, and there's the explanation to why. She's talking about the precedent set before and, pointing the NFL in the right direction headed towards the future. Bullet point number 2 on this. Recognizing that the only discipline mentioned in the CBA is a fine or suspension, I nevertheless believe it's appropriate for Mr. Watson to limit his massage therapy to club-directed sessions and club-approved massage therapists for the duration of his career and so impose this mandate as a condition to his reinstatement. So, if he is to play another game in the NFL, she's saying, F your CBA, I don't care what it says, no more massages outside of the clubhouse. Team directed and team approved therapists and massages only. After your CBA, don't care is what it is.
Yep.
That's And he's got to agree to that. He has to acknowledge that to be reinstated after this suspension. And then Mr. Watson is to have no adverse involvement with law enforcement and must not commit any additional violations of the policy. Now, this is an interesting one. And this is interesting to me because of the fair notice. What if additional allegations surface from the same time period as these other allegations? There will be a lot of talk regarding this one sentence, because they would be additional violations, correct? But they wouldn't have been with fair notice.
Right. It would be an additional violation, but it would not be considered a new violation of the policy.
Okay.
Is the way I take that, just because he has not been, there was no fair notice given prior to this happening. But now he has fair notice. He knows that if anything like this happens again, that his punishment could be much more severe.
Sure. And the parties have 3 business days to appeal this disciplinary determination. She's just laying that out there. And that is where this document ends. So, Ryan, after going through all that, do you feel that the punishment was fair and just?
I do. And that is mainly why I was at the 4-6 games. I had went back and looked at the multiple instances in the past. And I just didn't see how they would justify going much higher than that. Like, it just, to me, mentally, it just didn't make any sense. I have a hard time articulating it just because there's so much that's involved with it. But I always was with 4-6 games. I just looked at everything that's happened in the past. I looked at the policy, and I just felt like that was what was probably going to be the most fair. You can't ask for something that's unprecedented when you don't have a precedent. So it's everybody likes to use that term unprecedented because that's the fancy term for it. But the fact is you have to have a precedent, in order to do things like this, where you're going to open yourself up for possible litigation. And I think that's where a lot of the people are saying that if you, do something and up the suspension or suspend this guy for 2 years or, do this, that, and the other, that you're opening yourself up for litigation. Whether or not Watson's going to win that litigation, that's to be seen. But that's what opens the door for it, is when you don't have that fair notice and you don't have that precedent, federal law kind of comes into play as far as employment law, and it can get kind of tricky there.
So Dee is saying here, do you think she's saying if they appeal this, these things will also come into play and they need to be well aware, like, hey, here's the facts, do what you want. But, and I think that, I don't know that that was her intent, but I think that it would be a disaster for both the Watson side and the NFL side for somebody to start digging deeper into things. If there is a period of time where the ultimate goal for both sides is to dig up information, the NFL failed the first time, I believe. I don't know that they'll do that again. And for Watson, I mean, I don't know. I just think that everybody knows it would be messy regardless. I don't even know that she has to tell them.
I don't think she is. I don't think it's a pointed, statement. I think that by her putting that language in there, it may unintentionally kind of help Watson if things were to get hairy, because she's a former federal judge who has seen some pretty crazy stuff in her career, and she's telling them, in my findings, you guys screwed this up, and you're still trying to screw it up. So whether or not this guy did this, you're screwing up, and that could help him, in my opinion. I think that's something that could be used in a trial. This is an independent arbitrator that was hired by both parties. So, her putting that in there, I think it like I said, unintentionally helps Watson's side of things. But I don't think that she was purposely trying to warn the NFL of anything specific.
This quote from Redleg, which is kind of funny here, has a great point, though. Again, if you and I are in an elevator and I fart, how do you prove it to somebody who wasn't in the elevator? It's funny, but it's a great point, because even if there was video, and there wasn't, that we know of. There's no video of Deshaun Watson getting these massages. Even if there wasn't video, like, you don't have any visual, tangible evidence. Just like in Red Leg scenario here. If somebody accused him of farting in an elevator, you can't prove that, right? But if you have 6 people come out and say, man, Red Leg, they go down and they're like, you got to ban this dude from the elevator. Like, this is what happened. You know, you can see the disgust in their eyes. Like, you can tell it was terrible. You know, and then a few more come out and a few more come out. And then all of a sudden you got to deal with it, but there's no evidence. But
correct. Obviously not an apples to apples comparison.
No,
I get what he's going with there.
That's what I was referring to. The NFL was not innocent here, and it could bite them in the ass. You know who else isn't innocent? And I don't care that they settled the lawsuits. I feel the Houston Texans need some form of punishment, because we're operating under the assumption at this point that the circumstantial evidence points against Deshaun Watson, saying that he did these things. Now, while you can't prove it and it's all circumstantial, we are suspending him based on the information, right? That same information, I would assume, would point to the Houston Texans enabling him to do these things that are getting him suspended. So,
correct.
You know, what's that, Barry?
Give us a first round draft pick back.
Right. give us a first round draft pick yet. You know, and that's something that I hope gets brought up, is, you know, and I hope comes to the NFL's attention. I hope that's their way with dealing with the situation, is also
you're not going to, though, because
reprimanding the Texans in some way.
That doesn't save the NFL any face.
No.
The public eye isn't on the Houston Texans. The public eye is on Deshaun Watson. That's why they're wanting to bury Watson.
Right.
You know, it's not about doing what's right. If it was doing what's right, the Texans would be punished too.
Right.
It would be a zero tolerance policy.
Right. And that was actually, I think that was a misstep by the accusers.
That should have been part of this ruling, I almost feel like.
Right. Well, I just think it's a misstep by the accuser's attorney. I think that's probably something that probably should have waited until after the Watson situation was handled. And the reason I say that is when it originally came out that they were adding the Texans to the lawsuit, I said that it changes things in this game significantly, because now you're involving the Shield. Now you're involving an actual NFL franchise in this situation. It's not just about a player anymore. I know that in the grand scheme of things that the NFL player represents the Shield, but when you start accusing an ownership group within the NFL of something, of being knowledgeable and negligent, that is totally different than coming after just one specific player. And by doing that, I think it caused the NFL to react a little bit differently. They had to take their focus a little bit away from Watson and really dig into whether or not the Texans were involved in this. And I think if they were involved in this, the NFL doesn't want that to come to light. If they know that this NFL franchise was, you know, colluding or doing things that were negligent and allowing, quote unquote, you know, possible illegal activity to happen, you know, they're going to try to cover their, you know, CYO, you know, cover your own at that point.
Just like they did with Dan Snyder.
Absolutely.
Jerry
So,
Jones.
I mean, that actually, I think in the long run kind of helped things for Watson, kind of push things along, because, you know, it really puts the NFL's feet to the fire in the fact that they have to really start defending their own name now. It's not just coming after one guy and making one guy look bad. Yep. It's making the Shield look bad.
You're right.
Now, Red Leg says, speaking of buried, we haven't heard anything about Henry Ruggs. Now, his preliminary hearings aren't starting until, I think, right after or right before the football season starts. I think in September. With that being said, earlier last month, I think it was towards the beginning of the month, they ruled that blood alcohol test could be used as evidence in his trial. So there's not been a whole lot going on with that. But
why would they think that wouldn't be used against him?
That's just
I don't know. That's probably just a standard thing where they're like
throwing shit at a wall, seeing what's
exactly. Hell, you can almost argue that this level it could be a RICO case. I mean, yeah, kind of.
A lot of money involved, I'll tell you that.
A lot of money.
You're right. I mean, that's what they do. It's what the NFL does. They bury the scandals until it comes to light. And that's basically what Robinson said there. She's like, look, You don't do anything about it until it's put in your face and until it's making you look bad. And then once it's making you look bad, then it's going to be like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. You know?
All right. So,
Such a good looking dude. Look at you.
Ryan, you coming out to campground this weekend?
If I can make it work, I will, for sure.
all right. So we are going to do our best to all the tailgaters are coming out for Hall of Fame weekend. Ryan and I and Barry, we're all in the Canton area, and they all converge on the campground that Barry and I go to, and they stay for the week or through the weekend or whatever, and they tailgate just all week. And it's quite the time to party. So we're going to try to go live from the campground and do some things with them. What's that?
It's a bum of all back.
Oh, Jesus. But the week-to-week question, can I come back? Yeah. Does anybody in the comments have any other questions or comments or anything else that they want to discuss? Put them in there. Sorry we ran a little bit over. I was going to put the link in the comments, but I think we're going to run out of time tonight. Janet, you're very welcome.
Good to see you, Janet. Welcome back. Thank you.
I think it was a good show, though. From what I did get on and watch, you guys did a real good job of explaining.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Kind of breaking that down because it's a lot to absorb, especially you got somebody. A lot of people nowadays have like ADD, so they skim through stuff. You really did breaking it down and a lot of layman's terms to it.
Well, and you know, the thing that really kind of rubs me the wrong way is the people that immediately come to Twitter after this ruling came out and social media saying that, you know, Sue Robinson said that this guy is a sexual predator and that he's, you know, an offender and this, that, and the other. And that's just simply not true. I understand that she's saying that it's more likely than not that he could have anticipated that certain things would happen given the way he wanted things to happen. But there's still no intent proven in this situation. Don't get that twisted. There's still no intent proven that he was trying to go into these situations to harm someone. You know, I'm not a stupid individual. I've worked in the criminal justice field for many years, both at the state and federal level. And, you know, I'm very against these types of crimes. So don't get that twisted in how I explain this. But, you know, I just don't like when people are reckless about how they read things and how they interpret things. You know, everybody interprets things a little bit differently, but it's reckless to go and still tarnish someone who hasn't been proven guilty in that magnitude yet. You know, more likely than not is not the same thing as guilty. You know, so
he was just using his angle, his DMs to
exactly.
Regulate.
Right. And, you know, that's very well probably what the situation was. And I think Judge Robinson was very, very amazing in how she picked through all of the information, explained how each charge impacted the next, and why she found those charges to be true. But just because she found those true doesn't mean that he's a sexual predator, doesn't mean that he's a criminal, doesn't mean that, you know, you need to go on to the NFL or onto social media and completely blast anybody that has anything to do with the Browns, because when you're doing that, you're just pushing an objective at that point.
And the NFL should be very thankful for Judge Robinson, I believe. I really do. And I really think that they need to kind of stand behind her. And this is just kind of for them saving their reputation. And they want to be like, you know what, she's right. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to get better. We're going to learn from Judge Robinson, and we're going to adjust things. And from now on, you know, this is not going to be tolerated. Like we do not do this. And you know, if they were smart, they would use this and build from it. They would start it and use it as a building block and straighten out their league.
100%
is what they should be doing.
100%. And I'll tell you what, if they come out nasty and appeal that, it's going to get crazy. So buckle up.
I don't think they're going to. I don't
think so either.
Because they know that Deshaun Watson is going to sue him. They're going to sue him, and it's going to get drug out everywhere. And like right now, they have to, and they want it to go away. Naturally, they want it to go away. And if they try to kick him out longer, it's not going to go away, because then it's going to get dragged out even longer, because now he's going to sue him, and then there's going to be more lawsuits, and he's going to sue the Texans, and then if they're like, okay, you're right, this is what we should do, we need to be better at this. We accept Judge Robinson's, ruling, and just wait for the next CBA.
Correct.
All right. And I said I wasn't going to put the link in, but I said screw it. Do it anyways. Red Light, thanks for joining the show. How you doing, man?
Good, guys. How you tonight?
If I'd have went the rest of this night and not been able to see Red Lake's face, I would have been just terrible.
I'm going to break your heart. I'm not going to be here next week. It's going to be on vacation.
Oh, no. Oh, man.
But
where are you going?
Look at this. Look at this.
Yes!
Where are you going?
We're at the Dawgs Table. I love it.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
we're going down to Florida for a week. And then, like 4 days, whatever. Then on the way home, we're going to go to the Jag game. And so we're going to visit that stadium and check it out. And so
Very cool.
that's the plans.
Man, so
Have a great vacation.
Well, thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yep.
pretty cool.
So, and again, I know I'm late here, but great show tonight, guys. Good talk and stuff like that. And,
Thank you. Appreciate it. If the NFL, real quick, if the NFL does appeal or if there's any more turmoil next week, keep an eye out because we'll have a special guest on. They just couldn't make it tonight. So we'll foreshadow that for the next show. There wouldn't be much to talk about. Maybe he'll come on anyways if there's no legal stuff to talk about. But yeah, Red Lake, how do you feel after the discussion and taking a closer look at this document today?
No, I think you're right. I think that you're not going to see – you're going to see the NFL saber rattle this week. That we got one more day to go through, and they're going to talk about filing stuff. We're not sure and all that kind of crap. They're done. They want this gone probably more than Watson does, honestly. He's getting paid. They just want to move on to the league and just, protect, like I said, protect the shield, move on, next thing. You're going to start you'll probably see some kind of more action tomorrow too, I'd imagine. Something to start to diffuse that and kind of get people thinking. The other thing too is you guys are probably seeing this too on social media. The Browns are being super fan-centric at training camp. Like every other photo is not just practice. Hey, look at post practice. Hey, we're throwing footballs back and forth. And I wish that were the norm, but I think it's just this coordinated campaign. The players don't realize it. I mean, I think they're college educated and smart enough to graduate, but you're seeing PR moves that you're not necessarily going to actualize until you go, wait a minute, this is weird.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, that's funny you brought that up because the field voting, did they ever do that in the past?
No.
When did they ever care about what the fans want on the field?
Yeah.
Oh, Barry. So here's what you missed. They put a poll up on the Cleveland Browns website. There's 4 different choices. 2 had the elf, if I believe, for center of the field. 1 had a Browns helmet with the elves in the end zone, and 1 was just Browns in the Browns helmet, I think.
Right.
And they let the fans
season
vote for this season's field design.
They're going to run away with the elf. The elf's going to run away.
I voted for the elf.
The elf's going to run away.
Well, there's 2. I voted for the running elf, I think is the one I voted for.
I voted for the one on Red Leg's hat.
I voted for the vintage one, the first one. And he should have a crown on his head, but I'm okay with that.
So I got a question for you guys, and maybe you've covered it already before I got here. I don't know. I need a prediction. Jacoby Brissett after 6 games. What's our record?
If Keenum can win a game, I'm sure Brissett can win a game at least, if not more. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you and say I know much about him.
Barry, can you tell me if we're gonna have any wide receivers that can actually walk?
Yeah, I heard about that too. We have an update on that yet or anything? Or?
No. I know Cooper did not practice today. He was in sweats and a sweatshirt or whatever, hoodie.
Was he walking around now?
He was walking around. Yeah, I don't think there was any reports of him in a cast or anything like that. So
well, he'll be all right then.
Yeah, but I'm just being facetious, just because I've been clamoring for another wide receiver since the sun came up in 2020. So
he's taking some heat for it on social media.
Oh
too.
My goodness, all day, every day. But no, to answer your question, Barry, I think 4-2 or 3-3 at the worst.
And I think I think at 3-3 the season's still there.
Oh, absolutely. If he goes 500 or better, that's a win, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I mean, they're just building so much around them that if this team doesn't succeed, then it's systemic.
Yeah,
right.
At that point, like, I mean, the Browns are a classic case of that. Like, we have so much talent, and then we don't perform. But
yeah, I don't know who wrote the Dawgs Table article about Stefanski and the hot seat. I didn't see who that was.
That was Andy. That did not go over well on certain platforms. But hold on. Don't get to that yet because I want to get to that. Hold on. We're going to do a separate segment. That was going to be a question that I had for you guys. So hang on to that. Put that in your pocket.
Gotcha.
Bottle that rage. So to answer your question, Brad Leg, in my opinion, I think that 3-3 is a great scenario if we can get there. But realistically, if you were to press me for a prediction, it's going to be 2-4 at the 6-game mark. That is my prediction. I don't think these games are layups. I think that if Brissett has to throw the ball more than 12 to 15 times, it's an L. We need our run game and our defense to get us through.
I think we got the Pittsburgh game's winnable, right? Carolina's winnable. The Jets are winnable.
I'm nervous about Carolina. It's got nothing to do with their offense. I am nervous because they have an outstanding defense, and we haven't won an opening day game since 2004.
Honestly, if you put a gun to my head right now, I would say Carolina, Patriots, and Chargers are losses, and we'll most likely go 3-3, just because we never win our first game. Baker's probably going to play and light us up, and we never win our first game. So it is what it is.
Baker's going to light our defensive up. I don't think we are.
I don't think it matters if it's Baker or Darnold or Corral or Walker, whoever they have. I think that they're between their defense and I don't think that we're going to be able to be as conservative as we need to be on offense. I think that we're going to have to put it in the air to make something happen. So that's what I'm nervous about.
Right.
But Atlanta is the easiest game on the schedule, I think. I actually don't think the Jets are a layup. I think a lot of people are kind of like putting the Jets and Atlanta in the same spot. I am more confident against Atlanta than I am the Jets. So, the Jets have a lot of weapons, and Zach Wilson, he's got a lot to prove this year. We'll see.
I've got faith in Myles Garrett, and he said, what he said? They can't win if they don't score.
Yeah.
So,
speaking of Cade York,
this guy's getting the press, isn't he?
He seems to get tons of press. He seems to be a savior. I hope he pans out. But I mean, if we're I don't want to call it stuck with Brissett because we can have Brissett. If we're gonna play Brissett, York's probably gonna be on the field. God, booming him down there, and Charlie Heald's gonna be the one, doing the main job there. But, I think York's going to play a key role in at least the first 6 games. I mean, probably the rest of the season too, because, he's just – his role is going to be outside. You're looking at what – I think they're really pinning the hopes of the future on him. As weird as that sounds, like if we can't score points with the offense, the regular, we'll score special teams and just call it a day. Points is points.
Right.
And that's what we suffered from that the last, forever. So.
Yep. You know what depressed me this week? Pittsburgh signing their kicker to a record deal. Man, I just
hey, I mean, if that's how they want to spend their money,
whatever.
I mean, gosh, just rub it in.
Whatever.
I mean, hopefully ours turns out all right.
So today, Andy Gibbs, DawgsTable.com contributor, put out an article. And the article basically says it's a make or break year for Kevin Stefanski. I will defend him and say that he did not say that Kevin Stefanski is on the hot seat. I wrote the social media report, and it was a question. He made the argument that this is a make or break year for Stefanski. It could define whether or not he remains with his team, whether that decision comes after this year or after following years. What I put out was a question. Is he on the hot seat based on this information? I'm going to argue with all three of you. I think he is. And I don't think that means that he could get fired after this year. But if in my opinion, if he doesn't do something this year, if he doesn't improve off of last year, if he can't be 500 with Deshaun Watson after he comes back, I would not put it past the Haslams to launch him.
You're not arguing with me because I agree with you.
Okay. All right. I think he's on the hot seat to some extent. So was Zach Taylor last year.
I think it's
Listen.
right here. I agree. I agree with that. I agree with the article. I really do. Like the G and Jimmy. Yeah, they have given him, and Sasha's given him every tool to succeed now, right? What excuse does he have? You got a top 5 quarterback. You got one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. You got one of the best running backs in the NFL. You got one of the top defenses in the NFL.
Right.
Like, what do you want? Your coordinators are back. Like, you had a kicking problem last year. We drafted you a kicker that's high. Like, what do you want? What else can we do to put you in a better position to succeed, Kevin?
I don't know if I necessarily agree that he's on the hot seat per se. I agree that I think this year is going to be very situational for him, and he does need to build on last year because, quite frankly, the second half of the year last year was the.
I don't think he's on a hot seat right now, but I do.
No, and I think it really depends on how things go this year. I think it depends on how things go with Brissett. I think it depends on when Watson comes back, how he does with Watson, how injuries go this year. I mean, there's a lot that plays into it. If something happens and Watson comes back and we lose 2 of our starting offensive linemen, or Nick Chubb goes down for the year, or heaven forbid we lose Myles Garrett or Amari Cooper or one of these, top tier players on the team, those things significantly derail seasons, and it happens. And if that stuff kind of comes to fruition, then obviously I think that he's going to get a pass. I think they're going to look at it and say, okay, well, last year we were dealing with Baker, and this year we've been dealing with injuries, and obviously Watson wasn't here for the full season, so we're going to give you a pass. But I think he does need to improve on it, because if he doesn't, then the year after he's definitely going to have to prove it. If he doesn't do it in year 3 and year 2 with Watson, he's going to be gone.
And keep in mind, guys, the coach that had the hottest seat last year went to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
And that was Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor was on the hot seat in Cincinnati. He did not have much success before the last year. And listen, here's another thing. It's fine. It's fine. But if Kevin Stefanski, let's say the Browns somehow just shit the bed this season. I know nobody wants to talk. We can't talk about that because it's the offseason.
That's very possible.
If we shit the bed, if we go 6-11,
Jesus.
if we go 5-12, all right, here's the thing. We've had 2 coaches since 99 that have made it to their 4th year, right? We've had Butch Davis and Romeo Crennel, if I remember correctly. D and Jimmy Haslam have not been very patient. And they're going to be looking forward, and believe it or not, so is Andrew Berry, because
For sure.
you have to bring in a coach that's going to be like, okay, I don't get to pick my quarterback. Great roster, but I don't get to pick my players. I'm going to come in, and now the coach is buying into the system. The GM has the control, all those other things. There's other things that happen there. So that's something that they're going to consider. So if they do make a move, they're probably not going to wait. If they're not comfortable with Stefanski after this year, they're going to make a move now, because they're going to bring in somebody that's willing to stick with Deshaun Watson for his contract, throughout his contract. They don't want a guy that's going to come in, play Deshaun Watson for year 3 out of Watson's deal, and then, if Stefanski were to get fired after next year, and then be like, I want to start over, draft me a quarterback.
Right. I think we have that type of season
thing
next year. And you're right. I mean, if we have that type of record next year, I think that also means that there's something that seriously went wrong on the defensive side of the ball as well, because the defense is good enough that it could keep you in and or win a game or 2. You know what I mean? To keep your season from completely derailing. And it's happened in years past. So if that happens, then, not only is Kevin Stefanski on the hot seat, you're looking at Joe Woods being on the hot seat as well. And I know that's not a popular topic, because for whatever reason, people love him.
It was a popular topic last year at this time.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't shown me enough as a coordinator yet to be completely honest with you.
Joe Woods?
Yeah.
I mean, 2020, everyone hated him.
I want to see consistency.
Yeah.
I don't care about half seasons of football. I want to see you consistently put a top-tier defense on the field. I don't care about 6 games.
Give me Rob Ryan.
Consistently shuts down the AFC North.
Right. Yes.
Going back to Stefanski for just a moment here. I mean, this is the worst case scenario. The Browns hire Stefanski. He runs the 2020 season. He thrives in absolute chaos. He can move pieces around. He can put a team together that's new, that's different, whatever. In 21, he didn't have that. He had stability with injuries, not COVID, not 3 dudes, not 5 dudes, not other teams with 3 or 5 dudes out.
We ran it back with the roster off of
Yeah.
a Coach of the Year campaign.
Yeah, I mean, if he's not thriving in stability, then maybe that's his. We'll see this year. I mean, year 3 is going to be defining of what Stefanski can do with what he has.
It definitely is a make or break year, though. I agree.
Sure. I can agree with that. Excuse me.
We didn't just get criticized in Facebook groups for posting that. We got like I don't even know if we got Deshaun Watson out of those Facebook groups. They were not happy that we even,
which is a shame because Andy's a great writer.
Andy's an outstanding writer. And listen, I wouldn't not post an article as an editor if I didn't agree with it, because I didn't agree with it. But like, I agree with that article. Like, he made outstanding points. He's an outstanding writer. I think people read the headline and didn't read it and just said, hell no, why would he be on the hot seat? Get out of here with that
That's
shit.
what they do.
Don't start drama. Somebody wrote, don't start drama that doesn't exist. I just quit clicking on the notifications, whatever.
See, now you got a published article called "Why Stefanski's Not on the Hot Seat."
I tell you what, what you did is you basically just triggered every Browns fan's PTSD since '99.
Right.
What you did.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? They're like, wait a minute, no, we're not firing a coach.
That's why we can't have a QB competition for QB2 with Brissett and somebody else, because that would trigger people also.
I mean, honestly, in the sense of good fun, is there any other fan base in the NFL that has such stark differences in opinion as fan base than us?
No, I've never had so many people with common ground that have told me to go kill myself. Or,
I mean, it's unreal.
I mean, you had your troll. Was that yesterday? Was that last week?
Yeah,
that was yesterday. I had my own I was dealing with right before the show. That's all right. He tried bringing my kids into it, and my kid posted on it. So yeah.
Oh, speaking real quick.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, well,
no, you're fine. Go ahead.
Well, speaking of triggered, that statement by the Browns ridiculous, where in the bottom's like, we know we've triggered many people. No, fire your PR guy. What are you doing? Like, you're dumb.
Yeah. You think you got roasted for the article? They got roasted.
They got roasted.
My God, that was a stupid thing to post.
But we all go on social media and we defend the Browns, we defend the organization, but man, do they just have a habit of just stepping on their own foots. Like, it just blows my mind.
They do.
I love them. I mean, there was that European announcer that got roasted the other day when the German girl scored a goal. And, when they win the goal of the game, they always strip their shirt off, whether it's a guy or a girl, and they run around in their bra. Well, his headline ended in, instead of bar none, because he was praising her, it said bra none. He used to play on words. Oh, my God, they roasted him. People wanted him to apologize. Like, it was like, you would have thought he was a sexual predator because he mentioned bra.
Yeah.
Someone's going, where can I see this video? No bra.
I'm like,
lied. Yeah.
No, he did was make, make
a half-cock comment. It's just
people are just, they want to be triggered. They want people, and this, why do we want to be mad generation? We want to be mad.
Yeah. Back in my early days of Twitter, Browns Twitter, which is not that long ago, I caught Grossi. He was talking about not McLaughlin, Parkey or something, and it made a meme, and it said, Parkey showing up to Cleveland Brown Stadium this morning. And it was a picture of a car parked across 2 handicap spaces. I'm like, that's kind of messed up. Why don't you take a picture? What if I take a picture of that? And then I was like, nah. And then an hour later, I'm like, maybe I will, just to save it for fun. And then it was gone. I'm like, oh, it was bad.
Crazy.
It is just dumb. So
Ryan,
so funny.
Ryan was joking before the show that I had to post my trolls today. So here we go. I use some words with this guy I don't normally use on Twitter, but my son actually replied to this with a meme he made with a baby picture of me and him. And by the way, he's 16 now. That's me and Landon. Landon 16, and he said, Craig is waving goodbye. The bottom says to your poverty tweet. Because he's like, your son misses your dad. Go talk to them and get off this app. Blah, 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 blah. So Landon responded to it. But yeah, there you go.
And on that note,
yeah, I've put up tweets before of some of the crazy things people have said to me that are Browns fans. We have common ground, but some people don't appreciate differences in opinion.
Oof.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I mean, that tweet that I put up back in March when I was talking about, I had it pinned for a long time because I waited for the day it would be traded and the reasons why. That tweet I put up back then said that, basically it's not Baker. It's the Browns, their situation, the money. We talked about that. And I was just waiting because, man, that thing's freaking just went and went and went and went. And people were like, oh, you're an idiot. Blah, it's Baker Mayfield. And then when it finally released that it's an issue of the salary in the Browns, I was like, I'm vindicated, you fuckers! Like, come on!
Right.
And then I unpinned it. I'm like, finally, I knew it was vindicated.
Right.
So it's just you can't get wrapped around this stuff. I mean, you can a little bit, but as long as you can just de-escalate and kind of disengage from it.
Right.
But
all right, I'm actually going to pass these headphones over to Lila real quick. She always pops in during my shows, and you can usually see me mouthing words or motioning to somebody outside the screen. It's always her. She also brings me my beverages during the show normally if I run out, but today is her birthday, so I'm going to go ahead and put these headphones on her so she can be on the show for just a minute.
Awesome.
And anybody that's on the show can tell her happy birthday if they'd like, and she can talk.
Happy birthday.
Are we going to sing?
hello.
Are we going to sing?
Happy birthday.
We can do it. I'll sing.
Ready?
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear Lila. Happy birthday to you.
I'm giving you your cracks this weekend when I get out there.
Did they sing you happy birthday?
Yeah.
Okay, make sure you tell them thank you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. I hope
Very
you have a
welcome.
wonderful day.
If you guys want to roast her real quick, Lila, who's your favorite sports team? Don't be bashful now.
Actually, I've changed back to Browns.
Oh, okay, you're not a
Hey,
Steelers
there
fan
we
all of
go.
a sudden.
I used to be Steelers and Jaguars, but this weekend I switched back to Browns.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Good
Just
choice.
this weekend. I dig it. All right. Fair enough.
And who's your favorite player, and why is it Charlie Hewlett?
Just say because he's really good, Lila.
It's actually Nick Chubb.
There
Heck
you
yeah.
go. Good answer.
Good choice.
All
Good
right.
choice.
At first it was Mayfield, but he got moved.
Yeah,
Sad.
it's tough when they get traded.
Understandable, yeah. I had to buy some new jerseys and clothing for my kids because of that reason. So totally understand.
Have my headphones back so I can end the show. All right.
And by the way, it's incredibly tough to find Njoku stuff in kid sizes. It's very
Right.
hard.
All right. So that is the Dawgs Table. Red Leg, thanks for joining the show. Barry, thanks for joining the show. Appreciate it. We are a Cleveland Browns live stream discussion show, roundtable discussion show presented to you by BIGPLAY, Labatt Blue Light, and Remax Edge Realty, the JC Group. I am your host, Craig Fountain. Join us next Tuesday at 9. If we do a special show this weekend, which is quite possible, we'll keep you updated on social media. Make sure you're following us at Dawgs Table on Twitter and Facebook, at The Dawgs Table on YouTube. And yeah, until next time, go Browns.
Go Browns.